Welcome, Colin. Good to have you back here.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's about 3 years, I think, since you left here. Tell us a bit about your time that you've been gone and then off. Went to Melbourne, but then in France particularly.
Yeah. So since we left Australia, it's been more or less like a chapter book. Chapter 1, year 1, we were in Paris at language school. I arrived with, as you know, basically no French at all. I could say hello. And yeah, so it was full-time language study for that first year, and pretty much bang on 12 months. That finished up, and we moved to Nantes, which is over on the west, not quite coast, but heading in that direction, just 50k inland on the west side. And so year 2, chapter 2, we were in an established church that had been without a pastor for about 9 years. It was hard going, and so that year was a lot of kind of revitalization, refocusing, just kind of being there to help out, and take a bit of load off the people who'd been carrying quite a heavy load for quite a long time. But always with the view to also starting something new, reaching out to people that were not already connected into a church. Year 3 that we just came back from, we launched a bilingual service that connected with an existing ministry among international students. So it's a standalone ministry called A Heart for the World, un cœur pour le monde. And every year that they've existed, they've seen people come to the Lord and then return back to their countries as ambassadors for the kingdom there, which is great. Our team saw an opportunity to use that kind of international environment to attract French people into a service that was not that traditional. When a traditional service can really be a huge barrier to a French person because of the negative view of the church, particularly the Protestant church. But we found that quite effective. We had a man come along the 2nd or 3rd week that we were there, a French guy who'd been in the Catholic Church as a child, hadn't had much to do with the church at all since. After 3 weeks in our community, the man asked to be baptized.
Wow.
So yeah,
awesome.
It's pretty fantastic to see those kinds of things
Indeed.
come about.
When you were here, one of the things that really impressed me, and I think a lot of others, was the way you and Kath made friends with people in your street, at Aldi. Everyone seemed to know you. You knew everybody at those sort of places. And that friendship evangelism factor, how have you found sort of friendship evangelism changed or didn't change when you got to France?
It was definitely a slow start for me, partly just because of the language factor.
Yeah.
It was both more difficult and more scary, I suppose, to go deep with people, knowing that it was inevitable that you would run out of words. It's probably only been the last kind of 12 to 18 months that I've been able to engage with people on that level. But Kath is Kath, and so she was straight into it and has made really solid friendships along the way. In terms of the difference between there and Australia, we learnt the value of being vulnerable, of being weak. So while we might think that doing somebody favors is a good way to kind of get into their heart, get into their good books, bringing cookies to the neighbors or whatever else, we find that often the best way to build a solid relationship is to ask for help, not offer it. So we saw that kind of time and time again when we were willing to say, look, we're actually not all right, could you give us a hand with this or whatever else. It was those relationships that really got taken up by the other party.
Wow, it's not what you'd think, is it?
No, it's counterintuitive for me.
Yeah. So you found that, as you said, you went to France, had very little French that you could use. That's progressed pretty dramatically, and
Yeah. There's always going to be a point where you're frustrated,
Mm-hmm.
but I find that in English as well. In the bilingual service, my role was to either preach in English and be translated into French, or it was to translate the French into English, phrase by phrase, sentence by sentence, thought by thought, without notes, without preview of what the passage was. By the grace of God, that is possible, and people were receptive to that.
Yeah, wow. What are some of the things that you've found difficult or very different about the French culture compared to what you were here in Australia?
There's definitely an impression that French people are closed, unfriendly towards outsiders. We have not found that to be the case at all. So, particularly as Australians, we're very well received, both within and outside the church. I've found it in administrative circumstances, so having meetings, there seems to be a little bit more implied or assumed. Someone will pose a question, there'll be quite a lot of discussion around that, and then all of a sudden you're talking about the next agenda item, and I'm like, but what did we decide? No one gave me the summary sentence where I now know what, what was the answer, and what are we now going to do about that?
But they all knew that.
They seem to all know what was decided and what we're all going to do about it. Provided the responsibility doesn't land on me, that's all right. And it's not a language gap. It's really that they just don't say it at the end. It should be that everyone's followed the logical thrust of the conversation, and even when you end with people disagreeing, apparently it's clear whose word was the winner.
Clear to others.
Yeah. Although not exclusively, even within the French.
Okay. And what about the other way, something you've really enjoyed about the French culture that you didn't see at home here?
Something that we have really noticed and enjoyed about Nantes is their embracing of history and their preservation of history. So there's a piece of wall from like the 8th century that's been looked after in the middle of town, and they're not quick to just bulldoze things and move on, and it's not that everything has to be the newest and all of that, but at the same time there's a lot of art installations, there's cycleways, there's amazing public transport systems. So they have a really good way of balancing kind of the progress and the working towards a future that is viable, while at the same time not devaluing history. And I think that's true of their culture as well.
Well, thank you for just agreeing to have a chat and come along today. We appreciate reconnecting. We've appreciated you sending through your emails and videos and watching the kids grow up a bit and see what they're up to. It's been really good. So thank you for all that, and we look forward to your sermon shortly.
Fantastic.